This is at Trustworthy Slav.
This is at Incognito, COH.
CRK, Black.com, build.
This is the Fed Post.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on, and there's a lot of things we should talk about for sure. You know, media related and everything, but I mean, honestly, I guess it's sorry to do this, but like, I guess we have to kind of talk about the Will Smith thing because
I didn't know where you were going. I was getting scared there.
Yeah. Thought it was gonna be something controversial.
Are you prepared to talk about the part that you played in Will Smith slapping Chris Rock? We're asking you the hard hitting questions.
Yeah.
What it means to me. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, you want to start there? We can go with that. I've seen a lot of interesting takes. So my good friend Hotep Jesus, I don't know if you're aware of him, but
Very aware.
Yeah. So, he made a big long argument. Big long argument with Jason Whitlock, which I was like half interested in. So I've made this argument to him about how white boys in particular have looked to black men as models of masculinity because liberalism essentially made, expressions of masculinity, illicit. And so that's how I grew up in the 60s and 70s, 80s, I was like admiring them. And I realized that's kind of why we were into this, why we're into black culture so much, at least partly, right? It's like, oh, damn, they get to talk like, men in locker rooms are supposedly talking.
Locker room talk. Nice.
The locker room talk that doesn't exist, right? The big myth, like men actually don't talk like that, but rappers do. So that was a big part of it. And so Hotep's argument is that, this is what Will Smith did and was sort of an expression of that kind of old honor society masculinity. So he kind of welcomed it in that way. And I'm not there with it, but I do think the bigger argument is the important one, which is that masculinity, traditional masculinity, forms of it, expressions of it have absolutely been disbarred. I mean, they've been barred from society. We can't do that. Certainly sort of in the middle class, upper class, I think working class is a totally different story. And that's across colors, by the way. But yeah, I mean, to me, it was in part about that. It was about masculinity. And, but it was Hotep's, I think, even deeper point was about the Puritanism that still, believe it or not, I think pervades much of American culture, kind of like undergirds it. So one of the things that happened in the 19th century was they made street fighting illegal, basically. And until then, there were no real police forces to speak of that could do much until the 19th century. So until then, there wasn't really there was like fights in the streets all the time. It was like a normal
duels.
Thing. Yeah. Well, I mean, just punching people. It was just like a lot of spontaneous violence. And this was mostly working class. And then when the progressives took over, like toward the late 19th century, they professionalized the police forces and made sure that not only would they lock people up for fighting in the streets, but they would shame that activity. And you were seen as shameful if you couldn't control your impulses, your violent impulses. And now I'm not advocating that people run around punching people in the face whenever they get upset, but it was part of the establishment of what Curtis Yarvin calls the cathedral. It was part of taking control. It was part of the monopolization of violence by the state, which is really what this is about. And so, you can be violent if you're in a boxing ring or a UFC cage, or you're in the army, or you're in the police force. But other than that, if you show any violence anywhere, you're not okay. You're a bad person. And that's been the dominant norm for more than a century. And it's part of keeping us under control, right? And it's part of telling us that we can't protect ourselves. We should not protect ourselves. We should not provide for our own security. The state should do that. So that's there's many other things to talk about with that. I mean, I found it to be I was as shocked as anybody, by it. And I was trying to figure out if it was fake for most of that night and asking people on Twitter, then I still don't know how fake it was. But yeah, I'm curious what you guys think.
I mean, I do want to return to men slapping each other with gloves and challenging each other to duels and Congress people shooting each other over bills and shit. That's kind of base, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess the first reaction I had was that it was fake. The punch sounded very crisp, or slap or whatever. It sounded very crisp. It sounded like sound design, but they
mic'd his hand up.
Yeah, they mic'd it up. There's a zoom in, and Chris Rock has like a patch on his cheek or whatever. But I don't know. I know SLAV was joking about it being set up or whatever. Like, I actually don't think it was set up. I actually don't. I think.
Well, I'll say I have a bit of a nuanced take on that, which I think is.
Here we go.
Nuanced.
Love me some nuance. Yeah.
Dude, I think. Excuse me. I think it was probably authentic and genuinely surprising in the moment. Like I've seen these fucking Photoshop images of like Chris Rock had a pad on his cheek and shit like that.
Crazy.
I mean, that's hilarious. I think it was like authentic in the moment. I think that like the presence of the cameras and like the fact that it was on live television, it just informs the behavior too much to where like it's intrinsically fake, dude. Like,
yeah.
And so it's acting within that realm. And so, it is. I mean, because again, dude, like, this is the oft talked about aspect of it, but like the guy, I feel like a little old lady talking about it so earnestly, but like he like laughed at it at first, right?
Yeah,
and it's like it's a fucking stupid joke. It's not even bad, know?
Right.
And so I really do think like honestly, just how like talking about any old thing with like normies think about like something like COVID, right? Where you're like, all right, normie friends, right? You think that everything's above board and normal with COVID and shit like that, right? But you can't deny all of this shit that benefits interests that was carried out because of COVID, right? And I'm using such a serious example, but with the Oscars, it's like this was, like every fucking year going forward. This was like posturing to be the most, poorly watched. No one was going to give a shit about it. Oscars, right? And then you tell me
in the tank,
that this is like the most anyone's talked about the fucking Oscars in like 15 years.
The most shocking Oscars yet,
Come on, dude. Like to be honest, the best thing that could happen to Will Smith and the whole brand that is his family unit could be if he had the award taken away from him, because then we get part 2 of this whole escapade. So I think it's real and fake and gay at the same time.
That's a reasonable take. It's like staged or not, it is on a stage. So
and that's the best kind of online opinion, because then I don't need to defend any side of it too strong. I can hedge.
Yeah. Well, then what about? That's an interesting take. What then about the whole Will and Jada saga? I don't know how much you guys know about that. I know sort of a little bit. I find that to be really stunning too. Just the very public display of all these pathologies and
these people are sick,
and sort of like and being on camera and talking openly about your wife fucking another dude,
absolutely,
pretty comfortably, at length, and then staying with her and then defending her honor in this way, whatever that was a year or two later. What's that? Is that fake and gay, or is that real? I need help on that one. I really do. What is the turning of one's personal life inside out to the public? What is that about?
I think they're at a level of wealth and fame. Will Smith is in the stratosphere. He's not like he's A-list, right? So I think they're of a level where they've sort of thought too hard about things, they've sort of inverted on themselves. And you look at Jada Smith, like the shit he says is kind of weird and cringe, like philosophical things. And like, there's sort of what is it? They're into like different gender expressions and all sort of like hyper woke stuff. Like they're trying to be like on the cutting edge of it. So I think that's why they're sort of like, my wife fucks another man, fucks August Aislinn or whatever, some R&B singer, like, and I'm okay with that because I'm more woke than you. Because I'm a little fuck man. Well, tomato. But yeah, he's just like, he's got like a different. I think he just thinks of it as like I'm more enlightened than the common man, and I don't think he thinks of it from like an arrogant point of view. But he's trying to like. But this is the thing, like he got roasted. He was getting roasted like crazy for the cuckoldry, and I feel like that slap was like. I feel like he was unhinged. I feel like he lost his mind for a second. I feel like he's been seeing himself get roasted and made memes of, and he was like, slap Chris Rock. He saw like the metaverse. He saw like everybody making fun of him, and he's like, I need to like slap him, set this straight, like make stand up for myself.
Yeah, put it on a record.
Well,
I think that's what it was.
I don't know if I can answer Thaddeus's question properly, but like this is so fucking interesting to me because it's like, okay, I'm gonna make sweeping generalizations here that are unqualified, but that's the medium. Let's just lean into it.
That's what we do.
Nobody gives a shit about television shows proper or movies or music or like actual proper art or media or entertainment. It's all the dumb commentary media about other media, right? So like there's fucking shows on AMC talking about The Walking Dead, right? It's psychotic shit, right? And nobody actually watched the fucking Oscars besides like people with oxygen machines. But everyone is talking about the spectacle, chemical runoff into our minds of the Oscars, right? And so like in that way, like, I don't know, like Will Smith was in that fucking Ang Lee movie a couple years ago. He was in this fucking Serena Williams. Oh,
right.
Apparently he apparently won an Oscar for it. That's a detail of this story. No one I know watched either of those movies. Right. No one gives a shit about that. The biggest entertainment product that the Smiths are involved in is their like lifestyle product.
There it is. There it is.
And
the vlogs. Yep.
And we all know what I'm talking about here because who is the absolute king dominating this field right now? We know it's Kanye West.
Right.
And
the GOAT.
And Kanye West is like, especially like last year with the stadium and everything, he just is Synecdoche, New York, basically. He's just Philip Seymour Hoffman in Synecdoche, where it's like it's real and it's fake.
Yes. Yes.
Does that make sense?
I like that. Yes.
We're in the palace of his mind. Yeah, we're in his mind palace.
yeah, exactly. He's constantly rewriting the play of his life.
Well, I mean, so I guess I'm just interested in the psychology of those people. What are they getting out of it? Why do they do this? And, you know, why? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. What is that? I mean, well, Kanye's got all sorts of issues, we know, but there's many ways to explain his behaviors. Which have to do with mental illness, et cetera. But with Will Smith, I mean, he's not mentally ill in the way that Kanye is. What is that? Like, why on earth would you do this? Will Smith, I'm pretty sure, could find another woman to be with, you know, but he doesn't. He stays with this person who does this, who ritually humiliates him on a regular basis. I wanted to say something. There's also another thing. Another context of this was race and the Oscars, right? So the recent history around this, you know, Oscars so white, which has been like farcically bullshit for about 10 years now. I think black people are like grossly overrepresented, you know, in terms of proportion of the population at the Oscars nowadays. But, you know, so there was this massive campaign for about a decade to get more black people in the Oscars. And then they did that. And now it's just full of black people. And what happens? Now we have a fist fight.
Now two black people fighting each other. Where's the white people involved in this?
Not a great look. Not a great look for, you know, the civil rights types out there, you know, who want integration and assimilation, right? And we want black people to be accepted fully into American society, which was the goal of the civil rights movement of Martin Luther King. Well, this is a step away from that for sure. But I mean, I don't know. And I remember sort of black Twitter, like sort of huddling up immediately, right, when this happened, to like make a decision about what black people should say about this, you know, like they literally were calling for meetings, you know, among black people to decide what the proper, the community, of course. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a wrecking ball in that, comedic wrecking ball in that whole project of like making black people part of the mainstream. But then again, maybe that's what the mainstream now is. Maybe it's now sort of spectacles of violence in these new ways. I don't know. It's a slightly scary. I mean, I speak on stages, you know, I do that. I get up on stage and I talk shit about people, you know, through a microphone. Well, I guess now it's maybe okay. Yeah. Maybe now it's okay. And I say lots of controversial stuff. Yeah. And I say now it's okay to jump up and slap people. Okay. Interesting.
I think like you're touching on something. I don't know. This is like, it's funny because I think that the Will Smith stuff is faking gay, and it's like normie entertainment stuff. But at the same time, it's like touching on something that I'm super fucking interested in, which is like, it's the specter of something real and authentic. And that's the most important thing that you can give people, right? I remember there was like some Lil Nas X post when it happened that was just him being like, oh my God, was that real? Right. And I wanted to like repost it, not that I'm on Twitter anymore. And I wanted to repost it and just be like, it's like, this is a hit. This is going to get 3 sequels, right? I think like if you were up on stage, it's less like you just committing an act of violence up on stage. And it's more just like a Gigi Allen style thing of like, if you just asked everyone in the audience to just like piss on you or to just do some crazy thing that was really real, that no one could deny, that was absolutely authentic, which is like the one thing that everything on television is always lacking, and everything in our fucking gay baby padded cell lives is lacking, then it would be a hit. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily have to be violence in my mind. But I think it's the most effective, probably.
It has to be. It has to be degraded, shocking in that way, debauched.
Yeah,
and
probably. That's probably the easiest way of doing it, right? I mean, you're not going to go up on stage and be like, I genuinely love my wife, and everyone's going to be like, wow, this is so real.
I guess, yeah. I mean, this is kind of not exactly responding to what you're saying, but I guess the thing that concerns me the most is on the biggest level, what's been going on. I mean, and you guys have always lived in this world, but I come from before that time, where privacy is disappearing. I mean, and people are embracing this to various degrees, right? I mean, it's Will Smith. We know like who fucked Will Smith's wife, like in detail. We know like all about it. I mean, and we've heard them basically. We've heard them talk to each other about this. One-on-one. We all listen and watch. Millions of us watch them talk about her fucking another guy. What's left, of his private life, of his soul, his private soul. I mean, it's you get turned inside out like that. I don't want that. Yeah. To have your identity completely public like that. It's worst torture imaginable.
I think. Yeah, because you're asking like what's going into these people's minds, like Kanye and him, and these incidents. Like I think fame. I think it's real simple. I think it's just the fame is fucking with their head, and I think now because of social media, everything's so magnified that they're just going crazy. I mean, anytime you hear like an interview nowadays of like famous artists or famous celeb, like a lot of them just have like kind of like bitterness because like they're getting roasted about this or that, and they just like they're rich, they're successful. They're the pinnacle, basically, and they're miserable because of the optics battle that they have to constantly be wary of. But as far, I think he just snapped. Honestly, him crying and all that. He didn't look right. But I don't think it was. I mean, as far as the big stage, like for ratings or whatever, like I don't think they got like a big ratings. I mean, they're trending on social media, like people sharing clips and all that. Like I don't know if next year people are going to tune in and be like, yo, I wonder who's getting slapped this time. Like, I don't know if it'll carry over much, but it does. What were you going to say?
No, sorry, I cut you off. No, keep going.
No, I was just going to say like, in terms of like my gut instinct of it being fake is like, I'm just conditioned now to just assume everything is fake because of COVID. I mean, COVID and I think COVID just kind of like reoriented the way I think about everything. I just think, it's hard for me to really take anything at face value now. And, there was a point where I started thinking like a lot of things were psyops that maybe weren't, but like in the peak of like 2020 and everything when it was all going on, like that's just reoriented my brain in a certain way. But it is funny when you see something and you're like, is this like, that's my first guess. And then I have to be like, kind of, check myself out of it, be like, nah, I don't think so this time. But that is the norm in general now. That's like the way we
it's just like what is real and what isn't.
Yeah. Dude, the default is that it's not real. Yeah, that's the default now. I
think shit like this is gonna become more and more common, and like what I was saying about just like shit that's real, shit that's like authentic. Like one thing that I don't see people talking about a lot is like Will Smith has a lot of mainstream celebrities beat out in a particular way, which is like him and his family do like an insane amount of like social media content. Like Will Smith's Instagram account is like a humongous thing, dude. Like everybody makes jokes about him being on that YouTube Rewinds But like, you know, the like him fucking looking through the binoculars and there's like a Fortnite bus and you have a brain aneurysm.
He's jumping off like the Burj Khalifa in Dubai and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Marquise Brownlee. And I think that that's a medium that's trying to capture and approximate some higher level of like authenticity than other stuff, right? And again, I can't help but see that in the slap and like
and with the sex life being open and stuff like that.
Exactly. Speak on it.
Like these people, I think it's all kind of a feedback loop here with the psychology. I think these people are sick, right? And then they go into a position of power and fame and money, and you know that kind of begins to influence and reward them for their more garish behaviors, things that get more attention on social media or whatever. Because like we're talking about, people like sensationalized stuff, but people also like the genuine stuff. So they kind of try to meld. How can I be the most like sincerely garish? And so these type of actions come about just kind of naturally, I think, for these people, because that's just kind of what's in their best interest to do so.
Can we drill down a little bit on CRK's hypothesis about everything being a psyop? Like I'm interested in that. And I've had a lot of guests on my show sort of dealing with that, like, you know, people talking about the Great Reset and its history, you know, and people on my show have gone back, you know, 100 years, and they've shown that, you know, over the last 100 years, there have been people planning for this in various ways. I'm not sure where I am on that, but I think the way you guys go about it is more interesting. So what is a psyop to you, right? I mean, the original meaning of the word means like a CIA operation, you know, to deliberately influence people's thinking around some important political issue, right? And it's always a conspiracy to some degree. It's like government officials sitting in a room and deciding, oh yeah, we got to change people's minds on this, so we're going to plant an editorial in the New York Times that says this, right? That's right. Like a classic psyop. We would all agree on that. But now we're talking about, you know, Will Smith making the decision in that moment to walk up on stage and slap Chris Rock. You know, what do we put that in? I mean, there's all this performativity that I think you guys are talking about, that everyone's engaged in who's in this world, right? Constant performing. And that is not entirely authentic, of course, because that's by definition, that's what performance is, or performativity is. So I don't know. I mean, I'm really curious about what you guys have to say about that. Like, what does it mean to you to say it's a psyop? Is there something, what was Will Smith getting after that's of social importance rather than just making himself a bigger star or more famous or making more money, right? That's less interesting to me. But if there's something bigger going on, right? This serves some other interests. That's what I want to know. And I'm not sure. Maybe there is. But that's kind of where it gets tricky. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think the Will Smith thing is aside, because I don't think again, I just think he just sort of snapped from like the hyper social media environment. But like, as far as like what a psyop is, I feel like, you know, just like you were saying, like, I mean, obviously it hinges on the media sort of being the delivery system. You know, the Iraq war, them saying there's WMDs in Iraq and tying it to 9/11, tying to, you know, bin Laden, when there's no connection. And, you know, eventually it just becomes obvious. And that's getting pumped through, you know, Judith Miller and the New York Times and everything. That's what I think of, where it's like there's a level of coordination and, you know, getting to the public psyche. Everybody's sort of shook up over 9/11, and it's just the perfect chain of events to be like, look, we need to go to Iraq, and don't think too hard about it. And then we're there for however long. You know, there's other things too. I mean, like, Too Big to Fail, you know, that's sort of less coordinated. It's sort of like a PR thing. I mean, now it's sort of like a catch-all. I think it's more broad now because of social media, because we're not all getting like a centralized media. We're not all just getting it straight from the New York Times. You know, it's sort of disseminated through all these different channels. People are getting their news from anonymous shit posters like me. Some people do that. Some people are crazy enough to do that. But like, you know, I think things have disseminated. So now SLAVs is sort of like, it's kind of, the delivery system has gotten more complicated in my mind. Yeah, well, that's generally how I think of it. Is like, you know, there's sort of it's PR, it's optics to justify something that benefits the elite, and it sort of channels through the government and then channels through the media.
Okay. Well, I think we're talking about like current modern conditions and like everything being a psyop, right? And I think like similar to the Will Smith thing of just what I was saying about, even if it is real, it's fake and gay, right? Of like, you know, when like the CIA or something is managing their like colonial holdings, the strategy of psyops on these like populations, like one of the desired outcomes is to just like create so much uncertainty in everything that permeates social life.
Absolutely.
That like there can't even be like an agreed upon consensus for like up being up and down being down and water being wet. Right. And that's probably like that just like not knowing how to give things clear definition seems really clear to me, especially with like COVID protocols, things like that. Right. Everybody around me is still wearing masks everywhere because they just need that meta narrative and that assertion that up is up. Right. And I think that like ideology and control through social technologies like this, like I think that consensus is this humongous part of it, like this collective definition making. And I think that everything being a psyop is just like a huge part of that, of just like everything is so and I think that the intentionality that CRK is talking about, I think we're like a little past that a little bit, right? Of just like, again, the Will Smith thing, right? Like it's not even anyone's intention. It's not even his intention, right? Like it is literally just like the camera is there. The camera is affecting the behaviors and creating a feedback loop like COH is talking about. And like that landscape is like essentially the realm where most of us are making all the decisions in our lives now.
It's baked in now.
And so everything is gay. And you know, what's a really good example of this that everything is gay now is like January 6th. I know we've had disagreements about this on the podcast, but it's like, was January 6th faking gay to the extent that like all the sentiment by those people is invalidated? No. Was it faking gay to the extent that like they were kind of lambs led to the slaughter and like it was basically like a Disney photo booth line? Yeah.
Or even that it's just like Pearl Harbor, or that like, this is Pearl Harbor and this justifies us like ramping up monitoring them and all that stuff. Yeah.
I mean, January 6th, we now know was definitely a psyop. I mean, we know that the FBI was all up in there doing much of the dirty work, you know, getting people to storm the Capitol. We know that. I mean, like a lot of work's been done by Darren Beatty and other people. It's shown that. So, I mean, that's an actual psyop, I think, from top to bottom. But so here's the question, though. Like, again, what do these people want? Right. So on the left, where I come from originally like a Marxist socialist, I was born into a Marxist socialist family. Like those people had plans, you know, very specific plans. They knew exactly what was going to happen. They were going to take over the factories. The workers were going to run the factories. And from there, they would amass political power and then take over the government and then institute socialism. And we'd all be happy. And, you know, they're very open about it. That was the plan. You know, progressives are a different story. And that's I submit that we've basically been living in a progressive dominated society for about a century. And the Republicans and conservatives have sort of like gone along with it, but just at a slower speed, you know, but what do these people want? Right. And that's who we're talking about. And that's who you guys mostly talk about on your show. And it's who I'm mostly concerned about is the people who actually have the power, the people who run Hollywood, the people who run the government, the deep state, academia, New York Times, right? Those people, what do they want? I mean, they don't want socialism. They want something else. I mean, the economic system is corporatism, clearly, but that's becoming more and more clear that this merger of government with business, you know, which originated with fascism, early 20th century. We know that they clearly want that. But like, what do they want the four of us to be like as people? What do they want the four of us to do with our lives? What do they want the four of us to think? Right? Are they just after control? Do they want to just pacify us and make us less dangerous and make us stop saying things that are upsetting? Or is there some bigger plan, right? This is what a lot of people kind of on our side of politics have been kind of talking about, right? Is the Great Reset Is that part of some giant master plan to engineer all of society to make all of society look like one big factory where we each perform our particular functions assigned to us by our betters? Going back to Plato's fucking The Republic. I mean, that's the original like totalitarian vision. Or is it just, I don't know, but what do you think? I mean, what is in the minds of these governors who like would go to, like my governor would go to, the French Laundry without a mask and the next day like berate me for not wearing a mask? What does that guy want? It can't just be power, not just power.
Yeah. Yeah. People are debating like whether it's the profit incentive or the control incentive. It's probably both. But yeah, I mean, with COVID as an example of a recent Psyop, I mean, there's the short-term gain, which is, easily measurable, and it's in Forbes. They just announced it, that the richest people got $6 trillion, and that's what's on the books. That's what's publicly known. So it's probably more of a wealth transfer from COVID bailouts, from basically getting away with doing the '08 bailouts again, but this time they have the excuse of COVID, and they're going back and saying we're gonna look back and we're recalculating how many people were in the hospital for COVID. They're doing all these. They're shuffling the metrics, changing the definitions of vaccine and all these things. So, they're that's the psyop really is they're sort of like, reorienting everything. But like that's the short term gain, that amount of money. But then there's also the long term gain of they get everyone siloed off. Everyone was isolated from each other, further atomized, further alienated, which was already happening before lockdowns. But that just accelerated everything.
More reliant on digital technology.
Yep. And they get to fracture labor even more than it already was. There's just existing trends just got accelerated. Small business was already going down. Now everything's even more monopolized. And they'll have, people just sort of reliant on UBI that they can just gradually lower every year. And I feel like that's the general thing is just to
now, do you think
accelerate the trends?
Yeah. Now, those things all totally happened. I agree with you. But like, do you think the ruling elites had that as the plan going in, or did they just find COVID to be a wonderful opportunity?
The shock doctrine versus I think it was coordinated, but I don't think a lot of people feel that way. That's where it gets into schizophrenia. That's where it gets into schizoid posting. But I really do think it was. I don't think it was shock doctrine. I don't think you just stumble into that. I think it's too perfect.
So here, I don't know if you guys know about this, but Jeffrey Tucker was on my show, and he wrote an article that was totally ignored about a year ago. That's mind-blowing to me, which is that he found, and it's clear evidence, since 2004, there have been people in the federal government at various levels who have been pushing for lockdowns in the event of a pandemic. Since 2004, this was Bush administration. This is like this is Iraq, right? We're in Iraq full time. That's what's happening at that moment. So you have these, and these were liberal types and conservative types, on sort of neocon types. Since 2004, they've been working their way up the federal hierarchy, and they had this, SARS happen, and it didn't take off enough for them, so they couldn't get their lockdowns. But then they finally got what they wanted in 2020. They got COVID. They got the big scary one, and they finally took control of key agencies in the federal government. And that's why we have lockdowns. And it's the motivation inside those motherfuckers that I want to know. I want to have each of them on my show and ask them the question, like, what's the good life for you? What is a good society to you? What does a good society look like to you? Why have you wanted lockdowns so badly for 2 decades now? Why have you been pushing for this thing to happen? I don't think it was to make Jeff Bezos rich, because in 2004, Jeff Bezos wasn't a thing, really, not like he is now. I understand the centralization of capital. The consolidation of capital that's happened is always good for ruling elites, no matter who they are. But I doubt that these lockdowner fanatics who got their way, I doubt that was in their mind. Maybe it was, but I think it's simply, at the base of the progressive consciousness, progressive personality, is this desire for people to be orderly. That's it. There it is. They just don't like disorder, and they want us to function the way they want us to go to work, and they want us to watch TV, and they want us to. It doesn't matter as long as we don't fuck shit up in any way, because they're running the show. I mean, it makes sense. You don't want people who are disruptive, and I think that's at the base of it. And some of us aren't like that. Some of us are comfortable with disorder and social disorder. Some of us embrace it. Some of us live in it. Some of us create it deliberately, right? But there are many people, and they tend to be government officials, who have the exact opposite personality. It's very weird. But they have these visions of a whole world that's operating, as I said, like a factory.
Yes. I think the big I completely agree with that take. And I think the big distinguishing line basically is, do you or do you not believe, this is the two sides of it, do you or do you not believe that individual people are just like infinitely malleable units for a greater system, right? If you want to call it transhumanism, it's probably pretty accurate. I think that we're talking about wealth consolidation and all those things, and like you said, like, yeah, of course that's a good thing, right? I have a hard time believing that that's the entire story, because honestly, kind of similar to like CRK's point that he often makes, like that was literally going to happen either way. There was a bubble that was going to burst in the economy, certainly not to the extent that it did now, but like that was inevitable, that was laundered through this, right? Wealth consolidation is baked in to the DNA of our system, right? And so in my mind, social conditioning is the big thing here, right? Make everybody into a little fucking bug man, and you can those systems of like predictive advertising and marketing are exponentially more effective. And I don't even want to limit it to just predictive marketing, because again, that's falling into the trap of just saying it's all business, right? I mean,
also psychological operations, like we're talking about psyops. We're talking about social media and how that's changed, like the way that Will Smith even operates. Well, that actually also happens for just everyday working class individuals. And so when you can isolate people, restrict their movement, so they're reliant upon social media, digital technology that's easily censored, easily manipulated through the use of various algorithms and marketing, things like that, then you can get them to give you all their data in a more constant way, because they're going to be pretty much constantly using these apps, whether it's through uploading a digital ID or your medical information to a vaccine passport app, or it's just using it to order food to your address and seeing what kind of foods you eat and stuff like that. And also just going on social media for your interaction, so they can, more easily put these psyops in front of you and manipulate your feed and what you're thinking and seeing, everything that you consume essentially, into confirming the interest of the elite in charge.
Yes. And this is why they need a system of managed capitalism, because unmanaged, unregulated capitalism is full of disorder. It's completely anarchic, right? We know this. So capitalism is like a bear by the tail for these guys, because they need the productive capacity of capitalism. They need to produce the big stuff and the tanks and the airplanes and the wealth and all that we get in the iPhones. But, capitalism produces, whiskey and porn, and people are jerking off instead of working, and it's on and on and on. I mean, capitalism has been the most disruptive force in world history. So that's why they need the system that we're calling corporatism, where the government allows the accumulation of wealth, the vast accumulation of wealth, in private hands, and they give that over to them. But in exchange, you play ball with us. And if you don't play ball with us, we're going to drag your ass from San Francisco all the way to Washington, D.C. and make you sit in front of us. And you're going to be ritually shamed before the country, Mark Zuckerberg, unless you stop all this, allowing misinformation, yada, yada, yada. And that's what happens. And they went back home, and Facebook, Twitter, they saluted to their superiors, and they went about, censoring the rest of us. So that's what they need. If you had Twitter and Facebook just being pure capitalist actors, my goodness gracious, who knows what could happen? But it's not going to be it's not going to move toward this imagined utopia in AOC's little mind. It's going to be moving in every other possible direction, right? Because people aren't interested in that stuff. They're interested in fucking and fighting and watching TV and getting high and drunk. I mean, that's what most of us really like to do. We're not interested in marching for social causes. We're not interested in putting solar panels on our houses to be virtuous. We're not interested in any of that shit. Very, very few of us are. So they have to have a system of managed capitalism. If they just let it rip, they're not going to get what they want.
Absolutely. That's why it's not really pure original capitalism at this point. And yeah, I mean, the social conditioning is a very important point, because in the '08 crash, I mean, there's you can call Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party AstroTurf, but at least there was an expression of like anger and resentment towards an elite. And this time that was sort of disseminated a little bit, and there was protests in Hong Kong and Chile and Iraq. And now everything just sort of dissipated and disseminated, and people were blaming each other. People were blaming like Asian people. People were blaming each other for not wearing masks, flipping out at each other. So it's definitely useful in the long term for social conditioning in terms of blame just gets spread around, and people just say, oh, you're the reason why I don't have a job right now is because you won't wear a mask or something. So that's very useful in the long term. And it can't be understated for sure.
Like refusing to wear a mask when everyone else or almost everyone else is. I mean, that cannot be allowed, right? Because that's anarchy. That is you saying, I'm not going to play along with even your most basic orders. Your most basic orders. And the mask was such a perfect symbol of it too, because it makes everyone faceless. It takes the individuality away from people. We no longer have faces. We all look the same now. It's beautiful. I mean,
the NPC. The
NPC. The progressive social engineer mind loves that shit. They love that shit, I think. I mean, I never heard them say it, but they must love it.
It's funny, Antifa getting mad at people who are like fighting people who are anti-masking. It's like they're supposedly anarchists or whatever. Like, but again, I mean, in general, like the about the censorship. Like, I know your show. You've had your show since 2017, I believe, and it's on YouTube too. And have you had any issues with censorship during this time, or have you noticed changes from the start to now? Yeah,
well, it's weird though. I mean, they're not that organized. Interestingly, so I had I had 2 or 3 full-on MAGA people, including the guy David Clements, who was like running their like election rigging project, basically. I mean, and that was not taken down, oddly. But then I had Jeffrey Tucker on to talk about this thing about the history of the lockdowners and the federal government. We didn't even talk about medicine. We didn't talk about the vaccines. And they took that down entirely.
Yep.
Wow.
So, which was entirely about the politics. That's all we were talking about. We were talking about people and politics. We didn't even talk about the medicine or any of that, any science, none of that. And they took that down. So I don't know. But it's, it's increasing. The censorship is increasing. It's tightening. What you can say on Twitter and YouTube gets smaller and smaller every day. And that's definitely the road. I mean, so everybody should be on Odyssey. Odyssey is the future, I think.
What is that?
It's going to replace YouTube. It's the blockchain. It's basically YouTube on blockchain. So nothing ever can get taken down. Nothing can get censored. Nothing can ever go away. Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's run, the blockchain is called Library, but Odyssey is the website, is the web portal to that library. And that's how, and so we've mirrored all of our episodes on there. You guys should do the same. Everyone should. And it's huge. I think they have 15 million users now. It's growing exponentially because of this, because every time YouTube censor someone, which is now daily, they go over to Odyssey because we have to. It's the only place you can watch that Jeffrey Tucker interview is on Odyssey.
I think there's quite a number of friends of the show that are operating on Odyssey now.
I bet. I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I mean, they're sniping people off social media and Patreon and everything. So it's been on our to-do list for a while to sort of diversify and like branch out a little, get on some different platforms. So
to make it, I mean, I think the tipping point will be when most people or a large number of people just find YouTube boring because of the censorship, right? And that's when they move over. That's when we get the normies. That's when we get the masses to switch. But, us political weirdos, I mean, we're the only ones who are affected by this right now. And but I think the censorship is going to crank up to such a degree that it will just become, everything will be like PBS, right?
Right.
Yep. All of those, all the legacy social media, I guess we can now call them, will become like as boring as PBS was.
I think that like by just based on like what the nature of this Leviathan we're talking about of like big tech. I hate that phrase. I hate big pharma and big tech as phrases because they're in the normie lexicon now. But big tech, just the nature of the beast and also how they morally launder their censorship is based on just the clumsiness and the kind of indiscriminate nature of like of techno capital. Basically, I mean, it's all kind of automated, right? Of just like we're just going to kind of have an AI have this stuff churned through it and look for these phrases and things like that, and then we're going to censor it there, right? And I think that, like I said, I think that morally launders it. Right. Because then you can just be like, well, hey, man, hands off. Right. What did I do? Right. But I think that's also, I think that you're 100% on the fucking money, that this is going to neuter and make the platform boring. And like with a whole fucking culture of just like fat, over cultured slobs who want to be entertained 24/7. That's the biggest fucking sin, dude. And yes. I think that that's gonna probably be a big, that's the biggest hope, whether or not it, like, you know, YouTube actually does, you know, the wave breaks and rolls over and we all go on to blockchain technology. I don't know. I'm not totally sold. I'm kind of black-pilled as a default on these kinds of things. But I think that you're laying out the way it would go totally accurately.
Yeah. It's interesting this coming up because I saw today actually Jack, I don't remember his last name, but the guy who made Twitter, he actually put out a tweet that was talking about how Dorsey, about 2 hours ago. Yeah, Jack Dorsey, that's his name. He put out a tweet out that says, the days of Usenet, IRC, the web, even email were amazing. Centralizing discovery and identity into corporations really damaged the internet. I realize I'm partially to blame and regret it. So it seems as though maybe that's kind of starting to happen a little bit. And this is kind of these executives trying to grapple with that.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, this is what happened in the 1980s. So until then, American media was heavily regulated, heavily censored, right? I mean, all the news came from 3 networks and PBS, and they all said exactly the same thing. You couldn't tell the difference between Dan Rather and Peter Jennings and Tom Brokaw. I mean, they were exactly the same people with exactly the same politics. And it was boring as shit. I mean, growing up with that, watching TV shows from then, it was just astounding. If you look back now at the 1970s and early 1980s TV shows, it's shocking how just boring and bad they were. And that's because of the lack of competition, because they had it all sewn up. They had total monopolies because of the federal government granting them monopolies. And then along comes Rupert Murdoch, and he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not only going to like talk about right-wing politics, I'm also going to have The Simpsons on TV talking about all kinds of crazy shit, which is exactly what happened. And he fought and he won and he broke the monopoly and with the FCC, and then Fox was allowed in, and then cable came in, and then the floodgates opened, and next thing we knew, we had Jon Stewart and all the rest of it, because people were simply fucking bored of, you know, look at the Soviet, look at entertainment produced in communist countries. Do you think people watch that with, you know, and are entertained by it? No, of course not. You know, anything that the government has a hand in, they automatically make it dull. So this is the white pill. You know, the more the censorship, the more they crack down, the more people are going to want to leave because it's not fun anymore.
Interesting. Yeah, the mother of invention will be people bored with the similar content. And yeah. I know Slav had made a comparison to before of like Reddit and YouTube, and yeah, I could totally see that with just YouTube just becoming so normie and so sterile that, you know, I mean, people go there, I guess, for vlogs and food channels and stuff, but I guess it could get really, really sterilized and people just demand something different. And it's weird, too, because, you know, I know you've been on Rogan and that whole thing, like, you know, him, you know, the government basically saying that he should be removed off Spotify. And, you know, there's always things about, you know, his channel on YouTube sort of getting shadow banned or suppressed a little bit. You know, it's getting like insane amount of views and it doesn't show up on any algorithms or whatever, or the trending chart or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that is an insane thing. How hard they went at him. He's sort of like the pinnacle, I guess, of alt media, of just sort of breaking out of the set chain there is of you know, MSNBC, CNN, and even Fox. He just sort of is outside of it, and I mean, it makes sense that they're driven mad by him and want to fucking shut him up.
Yeah. I mean, so that's another huge white pill. I mean, so Rogan's show is probably the biggest thing in all of American culture in terms of media. I mean, in terms of listenership, viewership. I mean, you know, and he beats the shit out of cable news. Now, cable news, which is still running American politics. I mean, I think that's basically right. I think that, you know, the laws that come down originate in the producers' meeting rooms at CNN and MSNBC, to some extent Fox. We know it's going to happen to them too, because every person who watches them is over 60. or over 70 even, I mean, so we know they're going to die. And this is why Rachel Maddow is quitting. This is why they're all quitting. This is why they're walking away from this thing. They know that ship is going to sink. Her entire audience was my mother, an 80-year-old liberal in San Francisco. They're going to die soon. And they know that. So those cable news will cease to exist as an entity. And then what? Then what? And when Joe Rogan has the biggest show, and then, all of us who have been on Joe's show, not all of us, but many of us who have been on Joe's shows, we have our own podcasts, which are sizable too. So, I mean, the total audience, and you guys, the total podcast, like anti-liberal audience, I want to know that number. How many people listen to an anti-liberal podcast right now? Right, we're talking
just out of need to get some alternate, just some different narrative, right?
It's got to be tens of millions. Right. It's got to be a significant portion of the American adult population are anti-liberal. That's a big deal.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a white pill for sure.
Yep,
it is. I think it is, and it's funny. The criticism of Rogan isn't even really. I mean, only the really far deranged ones say that he's like a Nazi. Like most of them know that they just consider him a gateway drug, right? They just kind of have a measured sort of thing that he's a gateway drug to the far right. But it just shows that they have to keep up like 2 layers of buffer between people hearing anything that's sort of counter to the mainstream narrative. They have to make sure you can't even get to that. Just some guy asking questions and not really like, he's not even very dogmatic about anything.
Oh, no. No.
And yeah, it's just amazing. They've shown their hand sort of recently with how hard they've gone against him. But,
I mean, because the problem with that is that I don't say this as an insult or even as a criticism, but like the reason why it's so unwise to go against him so much if you're the establishment is that like Rogan is a normie liberal in the proper sense of it.
Yes.
And so, you've lost the plot because it's still, try as, wokies or even people like us alike. Like liberalism is still so overwhelmingly hegemonic, and to pit yourself directly against someone saying the things that Rogan is saying is really not a very good way of winning the hearts and minds of most people. And these are a lot of things that I disagree with him on, that I will listen to him and I like his program and I like that he's speaking out against a lot of this stuff, but it still is like, oh man, like you're still a liberal, and but that to be honest though, as much as I hate to admit it, that probably also makes him the best, like not the best, but a really good silver bullet against the establishment, because that's the tune that people are set up to resonate with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think Joe's success is about being or representing the regular guy on the street asking questions of the elite. Like, right. Yep. That's how he comes across. I think that's who he is, essentially. He was doing other things entirely with his life. And then he sort of got interested in politics recently. And he's like, wait, what's this about? What's that about? I deal with common sense. I didn't go to college. I never read books about theory. But this just doesn't make sense to me, he'll say. He'll be presented with some political issue and say, wait, that doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain this to me? I mean, that's Joe's thing. And so I think he's channeling like a massive portion of the population who identify with him, who feel like I have common sense. Joe has common sense. We experience the world similarly. We see the same things, but there's these people who are running the world who are crazy, who are weird. I mean, Joe's favorite word is crazy, which I've actually criticized him for. It's like, let's drill down a little bit on that, what that means. But, in other words, it just doesn't match what most people's reality is. And and he's just sort of like throwing up his hands and saying, what the fuck? What is this? Please explain. And people love that. I think they see in him a chance to ask questions and challenge the ruling elite through essentially their own consciousness. I think he represents.
He's not pretentious.
And he's not pretentious, right?
He's not pretentious.
That's part of it.
A little bit of a moment of like the real kind of coming into conflict and actually addressing the hyper real.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, he just sort of gives an avenue because, like you're saying, I think most people just sort of view it as like, all right, well, what am I supposed to think today? I'll just go to New York Times or MSNBC and they'll tell me what I'm supposed to think and I just repeat it. And he's just by asking a question and not really having an agenda behind it, he sort of shatters that, which is why he drives them nuts. Right. And again, him and Trump, like just sort of being out of the machine, don't have the proper media, political, academic credentials, not pretentious. I mean, the amount of how popular they are, like people voting for Trump in places where he didn't have any like people running against him even, you know, the amount of enthusiasm and Rogan's show, like it shows the starvation there is for people to just sort of be outside of the mainline narrative that you're supposed to get, and which is a white pill in itself.
Yeah, I mean, so I went to Columbia to get my PhD, and you know, it was just unbelievably elitist in just totally unconscious ways. But to me, you know, what this is, it's the equivalent of some graduate seminar on Foucault at Columbia, and somehow some dude who's like a UFC fan found out about it and showed up. And who, not only that, but he shows up and he asks us questions about what we're talking about. And he doesn't understand. He says, that doesn't make any sense, man. Can you go over that again? That's Joe Rogan. I mean, the level of disgust that we would have for this person, right? And we do everything we can. The whole purpose of this institution is to keep people like that out of decision making. Right. That's the whole point of the university. That's the whole point of Columbia and Harvard, all of them, is to keep people like that out of major decision making. And here they are just fucking crashing in, not knowing a goddamn thing. Fucking UFC commentator. Are you crazy? We're letting him talk about American politics? The guy who can the kickboxer guy? What? The jiu-jitsu guy?
A speech about the work of Foucault, and then a jock comes in and it's just like, wait, he said what about age consent laws?
Shit. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, and he's got a good combination of confidence and humility. Confidence to ask these things and be like, yeah, I'm out of my depth, but I'm just gonna ask anyways. Just gonna talk to these people anyways. He's also humility to not be like, you know, I know I'm the authority on this. Like, there's a good balance there.
So now the problem for me is, like, I fucking hate the establishment that I come from as much as you guys do, maybe even more, because I come from there and I was directly harmed by it. I mean, I hate those people. I mean, I want to like burn down every fucking building. Okay. But I also don't want like Joe Rogan's running things either. I mean, that's also problematic to me. I am an intellectual. I do think Foucault has a lot of interesting things to say and important things to say about all things, right? And so I'm kind of in between here. I'm comfortable in neither. Well, I've been rejected by, and I reject the establishment. So that's done. With Rogan and that sort of crowd, I'm ambivalent. I mean, that's sort of also where I am. That's the world I operate in. You know, we have mutual friends. I've been on a show, blah, blah, blah. But I'm very ambivalent about it because I'd like to see some different kind of, like, I think CRK, you're just saying, I just want something else. We've had dumb jocks from the street ask common sense questions of elites, right? Okay. We've had the establishment establishing this globalist hegemonic monster for a century or so. We have that. I don't know what's next. I mean, I think it's I think on the social level, I think there's just going to be further decentralization, which is good, of cultures. I think you're going to have more and more subcultures everywhere. And I think that's a good thing. And I think political subcultures as well as that, and maybe even more political parties, which is also good. We'll have more competition. I think, though, on the global political level, it's going to get worse. I think there's going to be a bifurcation. I'm worried that China and Russia are going to get together and form this Eurasian empire. And it's going to be us and NATO versus them and their friends. And that could, I think the entire world will be reorganized in the next 10 years around that axis. And that could be relatively cool and peaceful, or it could be, you know what I think it could be. So, but on the social level where we operate in our day-to-day lives, I think actually I'm mostly white-pilled. I think we're going to have more and more just little communities like this one, you know, podcasting, just proliferate. That's what's going on. I mean, there's just infinite little subcultures all doing their own thing, not even being aware of others. I mean, my mother didn't know who Joe Rogan was. She never heard of the guy, right? I mean, that's your average NPR listener doesn't know who he is. I mean, until recently, when they made him famous. But the two worlds are so separated. It's wild. And now there's this infinite worlds that are fully separated. And to me, I like that. I embrace that. That to me is where human freedom can best flourish, is where I have when I have that many choices of cultures and subcultures to belong to mess around with, right? Instead of just the three networks saying the same thing to me in 1975. Now I can go anywhere to talk to anyone about anything.
I mean, it might sound kind of goofy, but like the way I think about it is kind of like growing your own food, but like but for like information a little bit of like, I think about, you know, I played in bands around the city a few years ago before, you know, something happened that shut all of that down. You know, the little hint there, but, and like, and there's something really satisfying and more real about just like listening to songs that your fucking friends made. And you know, I remember like listening to like Ghost Jail for the first time, right? And being like, oh, I fucking know these guys. This is awesome, right? This is awesome. And like, which, you know, your piece in the school episode is so fucking good, right? And
thank you.
And I think about you know, listening to other people's podcasts and just all this stuff you're talking about. It's just better for you. It's just better for you in the same way that like a fucking vegetable with, you know, patented Monsanto genetics, or maybe I shouldn't even go into that, but like it just isn't gonna, it's bloodless. You know what I mean? I don't want to look to fucking Jada Pinkett Smith for what my values should be.
Totally. I love Ghost Jail. I'm so glad you referenced them. We're doing an event in Chicago in June, and they're going to do a live performance there. I'm very excited about it. I love them. Yeah, it's like real art podcasting. Like it reminds me of like the best of the 1960s, the kind of underground art that was coming out of the 1960s. That's totally what it is to me. I'm a huge fan. Yeah. But yeah, it's a much more healthy ecosystem intellectually now than ever before. We were all ignorant fools until the internet. We were all ignorant. I mean, profoundly ignorant. The smartest and best educated among us didn't know a goddamn thing. We had to go to the library, walk into the library, go to the stacks, pull out a book, find the page, go through the index, find the one reference to find the information on the thing. Jesus fucking Christ. I mean, that's what I was doing, you know, until the 1990s, and that's gone. Now everybody can have access to anything. And that is just still a very good thing. We've got to maintain, we got to hold on to that basic white pill about the internet. That is still there. And even though they are doing everything they can to shut us down, to censor us, to corner us, to limit us, they can't. I mean, YouTube shuts me down. I go to Odyssey, you know, that's just one of many, many options we have. So in terms of day-to-day life and information gathering and community building, that's the other best thing about it, right? I mean, we get to choose our friends now from all over the world instead of just settling for the people who live near us and went to school with us. Fuck that shit. Now we get to choose among everybody. You know, and I think this is actually one of the good things about dating apps. I know there's all sorts of problems, but, you know, it's a lot better than just having your dating pool limited to people you physically know and physically see.
Like a 2-mile radius. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just better, you know, not to sound too much like Bill Gates, but it is. So that's still there. And that's why I still fight on, you know, and I still have hope.
Yeah, I think of all the, you know, and we talk about the downsides of the internet. I mean, everybody talks about it, but like, yeah, that is the one thing that's sort of irrefutable. I think that, I mean, we're talking, like the four of us are talking. I don't know you guys in person. Like, right. It's something that's sort of undeniable. And I mean, I guess my only thing of being wary about is like compartmentalization, like echo chambers forming, but that's sort of organic. And I don't know what you can really do about that. But even then you're sort of forced out of every echo chamber because everybody's sort of forced to interact with each other. You're sort of forced to see what the other side is saying in some way or another. So, but yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think, you know, like what your example with Murdoch and Rogan and like, you know, with Xi and Putin, like people breaking these monopolies is valuable in itself. That doesn't, like you said, not necessarily mean I want them to have their monopoly, you know, obviously, but to replace it. But at the end of the day, any breaking of that is I think, definitely valuable for sure.
Yeah. The expansion of connection, like through the internet, I think is a little bit of a double-edged sword because it's a white pill in that sense that, you know, you're always going to have new areas of thought cropping up, like little pockets of hope in a way, or of light that can kind of, you know, branch out, try to grow, connect with each other. But also like this kind of constantly connected, overstimulated world. I feel like when people view that as the main form of connection, or that's maybe the way that we have been forced to interact more so, especially with COVID, you know, isolation and stuff, it kind of abstracts away from, you know, meaningful material connection with the people that are around you, and community building on a local level. in a way that will affect one's life tangibly and immediately. We have an issue that we talk about on this podcast a lot, and SLAV kind of brought it up in the first place, but about how climate change, the way that a lot of the argument against it being focused on, CO2 numbers and stuff like that, it kind of abstracts the whole issue of being away from, being what you can change around you, cleaning up your local rivers and waters, to these, really big intangible ideas that are immaterial that you can't really actually do a whole lot about yourself. And so in that sense, people are kind of stuck in this paralysis where, you're not actually interacting with the things that are materially present in your life at a local level that you could change. And instead, kind of just outsourcing that all onto bigger worries or things that we really ultimately, we're not doing anything about in a meaningful way through, a lot of this communication.
There's a lot of concern about the people or Ukraine or these abstractions, right? And less concerned about your wife, your children, your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. I think like, you were talking about almost kind of the competition between like virtual community and physical community, and how in some ways, and this is like hell of a hot take and I like it, though I don't 100% agree that things like Tinder and being able to select who you want to become romantically involved in, or maybe I'm overstating the nature of relationships on Tinder by putting it that way, but and communities that form based on ideological and value reasons online. I think that there's something to that, and I think that the main impediment to that, because I'm not very optimistic on those things for the most part, even though like COH and CRK are my friends now, and so I clearly am an example of that, But I think that the main thing the main issue that's facing relationships you can make with the people geographically around you and relationships that you can make with people virtually is the centralization of information, right?
Yeah.
I'm really glad that I have friends online that I can talk to that aren't going to fucking discipline me into believing subhuman psychotic shit like everyone in my workplace is, right?
Right.
But, that same exact effect can very easily happen online. And so just the more that things are decentralized informationally, the better, right? Because the less that will be an issue. I mean, look at Tinder right now. I mean, Tinder is just an obstacle course of social discipline for sex-starved young millennial men. I guess Gen Z. I don't know if Gen Z has sex. I don't know. But I think that it comes down to centralization.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, my politics really is just that. Like, I'm just for decentralization. I'm just against monopoly. I'm against empire, and I'm against centralization of all forms. That's it. That's really it. I just want there to be more stuff, more diverse, true diversity, more choices, more exit options. That's the most important thing, right? If the government, if the ruling elite in my area goes bad, I want to have a place to go, somewhere else to go that's not far away, right? That's different. That's to me, the only politics you ever need. It's constant oppositionalism or perpetual oppositionalism. You're always in an antagonistic relationship with the ruling elite where you are, and you want them to have as much competition as possible. That's it. Yep. You don't need any utopian ideas. You don't need like the perfect society sketched out. Just break down the ruling elite and force them, most importantly, to compete with each other for your attention, for your dollars, for whatever it is. That's it. Then you're good.
Yeah. I think like, especially like the number one thing people say about our show that are like patrons or just fans of the show is like, they just feel like they only hear the kind of conversations we have on this show. Like, they don't really hear it in real life, or it's not comfortable to talk about it in real life, or, they don't have certain people that they can discuss these things with. And we were just saying like, none of this stuff is appropriate to talk about at work or anything like that. So, I mean, that is that's definitely a real thing that people just sort of want some type of alternative there. And I mean, we're just regular people. We don't really have any like media plugins or anything. We're not really tied in with anybody. well, now we know you. I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
I have to say, I love that we have to record on a Saturday because you guys all have regular jobs. I love that. Very unusual. Like in my podcasting world, like that's very unusual. That's all most of us do, right? And so it's like, what? And when you guys said, oh yeah, we do it on Saturdays, like, oh fuck yeah, because you guys work, because you talk about your jobs on the show too. It's like, yeah, I love that. These are like real people.
You want to know the funniest part of it too is that like I fucking, we all recently got jobs again too. So fucking scheduling has been an absolute fucking nightmare. I mean, COH is doing a fucking really good job about it. Yeah. But like, oh my God, dude. And COVID was a huge disruption to all of our employment too. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, it's, yeah, dude. Fucking A.
It's a realization point, I think, too, the COVID. At least for me, COVID coming in and really disrupting my like life as far as my financial stability, my career outlooks, my employment. Wow. That was a big thing for me that just kind of snapped me into the world of politics a little bit more, from being a casual observer to being like, wow, oh fuck, this shit's actually impacting my life. How can we change that?
Yep.
Yeah, the show started when lockdown started. It was born in that, so molded by it. So, yeah, I mean, that's really like how we had the opportunity and the time to discuss these things and to meet up. Otherwise, I don't know if it would have happened. So it was kind of a silver lining there. Yeah, but and then the other thing, and we were just like, yo, might need this Patreon money because we might be unemployed. So this might be the move.
And then ironically, also the realness is the anonymity. The fact that you guys are anonymous tells me that you're real people.
isn't that funny? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wild.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because it's like I say shit to these two guys that I don't say to really maybe anyone that I know in real life, except for my fucking girlfriend, who probably thinks I'm completely a nosball at this point, which is fine. She's a keeper, but it's gotta lock that down sooner rather than later. But
the anonymity definitely. Otherwise, I don't know if we could talk this freely about things, but yeah, I mean, we I feel like, SLAV had said this before. Sometimes we have guests where we kind of hit the upper limit. That's not really a diss to anyone. It's just like soon it's going to start turning into like debate tube or some shit. You know what I mean? But like, I feel like we could talk for like a couple more hours for a while, but definitely save some juice for the next time we talk. And I think this is one of our best episodes for sure. That's how I feel about it. But
I do too.
Oh my God.
Yeah, for sure. Easily.
Dude, all those other pieces of shit that we're interviewing. Hell yeah, this is great.
We'll come back. Yeah, none of you come back.
Well done.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Honestly,
that's great. Thank you. Thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. I wasn't expecting you to come on the show for sure, but
really?
It's much appreciated.
I'm a fan of your goddamn show. I'm a fucking fan of your show. Yeah. I love it.
Appreciate it, man. Really appreciate it.
High praise.
Keep going.
Very, very flattering as someone who has followed your stuff for a number of years now. So I was. It's a little surreal to see that.
Oh wow.
For sure. I remember years ago, my girl being like, "You gotta like check out Thaddeus Russell," and I was like, "Oh shit!" Like, yeah, she told me like a while ago. So.
That's wild.
Yeah, man.
I love it when the girlfriends do that. That's the best.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, dude. They're the main. They got your ear. They're the main line into the intelligentsia right there. I remember fucking doing dishes at the old house I used to live in Seattle and hearing you say the N-word on Joe Rogan and being like, all right.
Oh, wow. I'm sold. Holy shit. I'll subscribe.
It's the most important word in American history, is what I say. If we can't use that, we don't understand America. Come on now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. That's a great cover. I'm going to start using that. But yeah.
Oh my God. Now I feel bad bringing it up.
But yeah, thanks again, man. It's really much appreciated. Hopefully we'll talk again soon for sure.
Oh, thank you. Great honor. Thank you so much.
Have a great weekend.
You too. Yeah.
All right, that was part 1 of our episode. If you'd like to listen to part 2, you can find that at patreon.com/fedpost. Thanks for listening.